Welcome to our deep dive into the life and work of Richard Wagner. We've had quite a few requests to learn more about him, specifically, to go beyond those incredible scores and really get to know the human being, the person behind the music.
It's a journey that I think many people find fascinating, full of these huge emotions, drama, even scandal.
A life less ordinary, I guess you could say.
Definitely.
Hmm.
And I think to truly understand the depths of his work, you have to first understand the man himself.
So where do we even begin with a figure as complex as Wagner?
Well, I suppose like any good story, we start at the beginning. His childhood, which he spent in Leipzig, was a really interesting mix of influences.
In what way?
Well, his father, he was a police actuary, and he actually died when Wagner was only 6 months old. So his mother, she remarried fairly quickly to Ludwig Geyer, and Geyer was an actor, a playwright.
Ah, so that's where that theatrical influence comes in.
Exactly. Wagner, growing up, he was surrounded by artists, really immersed in that whole world of storytelling, performance. It definitely had an impact.
But was his musical talent evident right from the start?
Not really. His first love was actually literature. The great writers like Shakespeare and Goethe, they were his early idols. In fact, he even wanted to be a playwright himself at first. And his very early attempts at composing, let's just say they were less than impressive. I even read that he had trouble playing simple scales on the piano.
It's hard to imagine that, knowing the mastery he'd eventually achieve.
Hmm.
So what was it that ignited his passion for music?
It seems like there are a few pivotal moments, really powerful encounters that kind of changed his course. He heard Beethoven's symphonies and he was completely blown away. He saw the legendary soprano Wilhelmine Schröder-Devrient on stage, and it had this huge impact on him. The emotion in the music, the sheer power that it conveyed.
It's almost as if those experiences unlocked something within him, like a hidden passion that took over.
Absolutely. And from that point on, he really began to see music as the ultimate way to express himself, to tell stories in a way that words alone just couldn't capture. And get this, he even went so far as to transcribe Beethoven's Ninth Symphony for piano, all because he wanted to try and really dissect the mind of his musical hero.
That's quite a dedication.
It shows his ambition for sure, but his early career, oh, it was full of ups and downs. He moved around a lot, taking different conducting jobs, always struggling financially, and all the while he's composing these operas that, well, often went unproduced.
Like his first complete opera, Die Feen. It wasn't performed for 50 years.
50 years, can you imagine? You pour your heart into something, create a complete work, and then it sits unperformed for decades. It must have been incredibly frustrating.
How did he even persevere through those early challenges? I mean, what kept him going?
His belief in himself, his talent, that was certainly part of it. But you can't discount the influence of his personal life, which, let's be honest, was often chaotic and full of turmoil. Even his marriage to Christine Wilhelmine Minna Planner. It was this whirlwind of passion and arguments, financial struggles, you name it.
I read that they even had to escape creditors by fleeing Riga on a ship. Quite the adventure.
And you know what? That whole experience, that dramatic escape, it actually inspired his opera, Der Fliegende Holländer.
You have to wonder sometimes if life was imitating art, or was it the other way around?
He definitely had this tendency for his personal experiences to find their way into his music. It almost became like a recurring theme throughout his life.
So his personal struggles, they fueled his creative fire. Fascinating how that works.
And we're really just scratching the surface here. The deeper we go, the more complexities and contradictions we find. For instance, his exile from Germany, a really tumultuous period for him, both personally and creatively. That really marked a turning point, wouldn't you say?
Exile. It's hard to imagine the impact that must have had on him. Should we explore that next?
Absolutely. Let's take a closer look at those years in exile. It was a time that profoundly shaped not only his music, but his entire artistic vision, and ultimately, his legacy.
12 years. That's how long Wagner was forced to live in exile
Yeah.
after his involvement in the 1849 May Uprising. Being away from his home, from his family, and facing, financial strain on top of it all. How did he cope during that time?
It seems like being cut off like that forced him into a period of really deep self-reflection. And during this time, he really immersed himself in the philosophical writings of Arthur Schopenhauer.
Ah, yes, Schopenhauer. His idea that music is this pure expression of the world's will, I mean, that had a profound influence on Wagner, didn't it?
It did. It was a real turning point in how Wagner viewed music. It was no longer just entertainment for him. It was this way of revealing the deepest truths of what it means to be human, of wrestling with those, I guess you could say, primal forces that drive us. And you can really see this shift reflected in the essays he wrote during that period. The artwork of the future, for example, and opera and drama.
And in those writings, he lays out his vision for opera, a fusion of all art forms, this concept of a total work of art. The Gesamtkunstwerk, as he called it.
Exactly. It was about merging music, drama, poetry, visual spectacle, all of it woven together seamlessly. But, these essays also give us a glimpse into a, shall we say, less admirable side of Wagner's thinking. Judaism in music, unfortunately, that's a work that expresses some deeply problematic anti-Semitic views.
It's a sobering reminder that brilliance and prejudice, they can unfortunately coexist. To truly understand Wagner, we have to grapple with both sides of his legacy, the groundbreaking artistry, but also the troubling aspects of his worldview.
I completely agree. But let's return to his life in exile for a moment. This is where we encounter another pivotal figure, Mathilde Wesendonck.
A wealthy patron of the arts, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. She and her husband Otto, they admired Wagner's music and became his patrons, even offering him a small cottage on their estate. Wagner was emotionally drained, financially strapped, and their friendship provided a much-needed source of comfort and support. However, a deep connection developed between Wagner and Mathilde, a passionate and ultimately forbidden love affair.
Sounds like a recipe for artistic inspiration.
It certainly was. Mathilde's poetry inspired Wagner's Wesendonck Lieder. This collection of songs just drips with longing and romantic yearning and their forbidden love story that became the basis for his most powerful opera, Tristan and Isolde.
A work that explores the transformative power of love in a way that few operas have ever managed to capture.
And you can't talk about Tristan without mentioning Wagner's use of chromaticism. It was groundbreaking at the time, creating this sense of longing and unresolved tension that mirrored the drama unfolding between the lovers. It really had a huge impact on music that came after.
So even amid these periods of turmoil and upheaval, Wagner's creativity was flourishing. But his personal life, it remained far from stable. His marriage to Minna ultimately fell apart, and he was still struggling financially, still battling his own, inner demons.
And then, in a twist of fate that could have been lifted straight from one of his operas, a young King Ludwig II of Bavaria entered the picture. Ludwig was an ardent admirer of Wagner's music, saw in it a reflection of his own artistic and romantic ideals, and he decided to become Wagner's patron. Suddenly, Wagner had this financial stability he had always lacked, and Ludwig even promised to stage all of Wagner's operas, including the monumental Ring Cycle.
It's an almost unbelievable turn of events, a struggling artist saved by a king.
Right. But Ludwig's support, it wasn't without its complications. Wagner at the Munich court, his increasingly controversial personal life, it caused quite a stir. And then there was his relationship with Cosima von Bülow, the daughter of Franz Liszt.
An affair that certainly did not go unnoticed, did it?
It caused a huge scandal. Cosima was married to Hans von Bülow, a famous conductor and a huge supporter of Wagner's music. The fallout from the affair alienated Wagner even further from the court, but once again, King Ludwig stepped in, providing him with a villa on the shores of Lake Lucerne.
That sounds idyllic.
And it seems it was an incredibly fertile creative period for him as well. He finished Die Meistersinger von Nürnberg at his lakeside retreat, his only mature comedy, and he continued working on the massive Ring Cycle. But his ambitions, they were even grander. He didn't just want to write these operas, he wanted to create a completely immersive theatrical experience, a space that was dedicated to his artistic vision, a temple of art, and that's what led him to Bayreuth.
His own custom-built opera house, the Bayreuth Festspielhaus. Quite the testament to his ambition and his drive to revolutionize how we experience opera.
Let's dive into that next. The creation of Bayreuth, it was really the culmination of everything Wagner had been striving for.
For Wagner, Bayreuth wasn't just about building any old opera house. He really wanted to create a space that would completely immerse the audience in his world, his art.
It was the culmination of that idea we talked about, the Gesamtkunstwerk, a total work of art where everything contributes to the experience. He imagined a theater that would be specifically designed to heighten the impact of his operas, a place where every little detail, the architecture, the acoustics, even the seating, all of it working together to create something truly transformative.
And he really poured his heart and soul into the project, didn't he? Even with all the financial and logistical hurdles he faced.
The construction of the Festspielhaus, it was a massive undertaking, both financially and artistically. There were constant setbacks, and Wagner really had to rely heavily on King Ludwig's generosity and the tireless fundraising efforts of all those Wagner societies. But that belief in his vision, it just never wavered. He kept pushing forward.
And then there were all those innovations he introduced at Bayreuth, things that really did change the way people experienced opera, like the darkened auditorium. I mean, that was a radical departure from tradition.
It was. By dimming the lights during the performances, Wagner really shifted the focus completely to the stage. It created a much more immersive experience for the audience, and he was very deliberate about that. He wanted to eliminate any distractions, draw people into the world of the opera, the drama unfolding before them.
And then there's that hidden orchestra pit, another one of his innovations that added to that sense of immersion.
Wagner felt that seeing the orchestra, it actually detracted from the drama on stage. So he put the orchestra below the stage, out of sight. That way, the music could kind of wash over the audience without any visual interruptions, enveloping them in sound.
And of course, Bayreuth became the stage for the premiere of the complete Ring Cycle in 1876. Quite the historical event.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it. The premiere of The Ring, it was this huge cultural event. People came from all over Europe to witness this groundbreaking work, to experience it in this brand new revolutionary theater. It was the realization of Wagner's vision on a grand scale, a defining moment in his career.
And the reactions to The Ring, I imagine they were quite mixed. Some people praising it as a masterpiece, others perhaps a bit overwhelmed by it all.
Well, let's be honest, Wagner's operas, they weren't exactly easy listening, even for experienced opera goers. The themes were complex, the music was unconventional, and they could be very long. The Ring, in particular, it really demanded a lot from the audience, their time, their attention. It was a challenging work that defied easy categorization. People either loved it or hated it. There wasn't much middle ground.
But even with the success of Bayreuth, his creative drive, it didn't stop there. He kept composing. There was still so much he wanted to express.
In his final years, he completed Parsifal, a much more spiritual work compared to his earlier operas. It deals with these themes of redemption, sacrifice, really showcasing a different side of his artistry.
And then, in 1883, Wagner died in Venice,
Yeah.
leaving behind a legacy that's as complex and multifaceted as the man himself.
Richard Wagner, a man of passion, ambition, undeniable genius, but also controversy. He pushed the boundaries of opera, revolutionized the relationship between music and drama, and his works. They continue to inspire and challenge audiences to this day.
It seems like understanding Wagner the person, the human being behind the music, it really enriches our appreciation for his work. We can admire his genius while acknowledging the flaws that make him, well, human. And maybe that's the best way to approach any artist, isn't it? To embrace all those complexities, the contradictions, the things that make them who they are. What do you think? How does understanding Wagner's life and personality affect how you listen to his music? It's something to consider as you continue to explore his work, a world full of beauty and drama and, even controversy.